Today I'd like to talk a little bit about Dinnseanchas, or Dinnseanchas. Seanchas is, it means old tradition in Irish, at least in modern Irish. In medieval Irish it was Seanchas, and in Old Irish it was Sengus. This comes from Sean, meaning old, and Chas, which is a word which has a number of different meanings, but in this case it means tradition. I'll make another video about Seanchas. There are many different types of it, but one common type of it is Dinnseanchas. What Dinnseanchas is it is the old tradition of place names, with Din being a medieval Irish word for a place name. In modern Irish it's just Dinnseanchas, but it means the same thing. But in order to understand Dinnseanchas, you first need to understand the nature of Irish place names. So, take for a few examples. For example, Dublin is Divlin, which means Blackpool. Belfast is Bailferste, the mouth of the Farset River. Galluv, which is Galway, of course. Galluv means a tribe of foreigners, or a place where foreigners live. Gal, much like in Latin, means a foreigner in Irish, usually referring to the English or the Normans, but can also be used to refer to the Vikings. For example, in the book Cogare Gael Galluv, the wars between the Irish and the foreigners, or the Vikings. And this city gets its name from Basque traders who came to Galway to trade, obviously. And they also brought their sport, pelota, which became Basque handball. And that's related to just an old word for a ball, which is common in Irish, hence the name pel. Not to digress too much. The Dinnseanchas is preserved in a number of different manuscripts. The most common two are on Dinnseanchas Mór, or the greater Dinnseanchas, and the metrical Dinnseanchas, which is written in the form of poetry rather than prose. But Dinnseanchas is preserved in other medieval manuscripts, in stories. For example, on Tanbo Culne, which is the cattle raid of Culne, a famous epic from Irish mythology, and also in Aclav na Shinarach, which is the discourse of the elderly, of the old timers, and that's one of the many stories regarding Saint Patrick talking to a pagan, and that's in this case that would be Oisín after returning from Chernanog. But the point I like to make about Dinnseanchas is that it's basically a form of recollecting or remembering, not the origins of place names specifically, although that could be the case in, for example, any poem relating to Tara or Chower, Temar in medieval Irish, because that was the seat of the High Kings, and obviously this is a place of great importance, and that importance needs to be preserved orally through poetry and through the ritual of remembrance, which is what I'm getting at here. But the place names, the Dinnseanchas, also serves another purpose, which is to recollect where your ancestors lived, and thus to remember yourself in your past life. So, for example, in Tanbo Culne, the Dinnseanchas part is it goes around all of Ireland, relating names of place names which, from a historical point of view, may have never even existed. Often these are mythical or mystical names for places, and they give an extra credence or importance to the place itself. Even if a place is relatively new, it makes it feel old. It makes you remember it, right? It's like a mnemonic, like a key to unlocking the past. The other form of a place name, of Dinnseanchas rather, is when you are literally remembering the origins of a place in order to remember how old it is. Certainly for places which had been habitated in pagan times and continue to be habitated in Christian times, the pagan tradition of Dinnseanchas carried through with these people trying to remember the history and the greatness of a place. So in Knugba, which is Nouth, there's a graveyard there, dating back to pagan times. We know this because of grave goods as well as how they're buried. They're not buried east to west like the Christians. And in Bruna Boyna as well, it's the same thing. You see places which had been habitated for thousands and thousands of years, since the Neolithic, continue to be habitated in early medieval times by pagans and Christians. And to recollect the ancestral history of a place like this, Dinnseanchas comes into factor there. It's a tool to allowing you to do so. It's quite comparable to another form of Seanchas, which is the genealogical run. So Seanchas na Shinshara, and that would be a Seanchas of the ancestors, right? So if you look at some of the earliest ever written records in Ireland, were of genealogies of quasi-mythical kings and where they ruled and how long they ruled. I really see this as not so much an attempt at preserving a history or even manufacturing a history, but it's very similar to Dinnseanchas. It's building up a mythical history in order to preserve the importance of the actual one. Because of course, behind every name, behind every place, behind everything we've created, there's of course a very long history which wasn't written down, which we don't know about. And it's very easy to disregard this and say it isn't important. There was one more facet in which Dinnseanchas is represented, and that is the one which is most present in Ireland today. In Ireland, there's a tradition of knowing as many places as possible, I guess, and knowing exactly where everyone is from. For example, if you live outside of Ireland and someone asks you, you meet an Irish person, they ask you where you're from, they don't expect you to tell them the county or the city where you're from. They expect you to tell them the very village where you grew up, and they would be disappointed if they didn't know where this was. Also, if you look at the tradition of nobility in Ireland, Gaelic nobility, which continues today in a very strange sense. For example, there are various festivals in the west of Ireland regarding, it's sort of similar to the May King and May Queen around Bealtaine, but it's on Ardri, the High King, and it's there are certain families who certainly who are sort of elected as noble at various times of the year in various places, and the tradition of knowing where you're from exactly is incredibly important to this, because as I'll discuss in another video, the concept of nobility in the Aryan tradition is inherently tied with the soil, with the homeland, the allodium, and the purpose of Dinnseanchas there also helps to elucidate that. Well, that's all I have to say in this matter. I'll make some more videos. This has been a bit hectic, but yeah, just thought I'd share that.